I never believed the stories people told around campfires. You know the kind. The ones where someone hears footsteps outside their tent. The ones where a camper disappears for 5 minutes and comes back, different. The ones where everyone laughs until the fire dies down and suddenly nobody wants to look into the trees anymore. I always thought those stories were made up to scare kids. I don't anymore. Because 4 summers ago, I worked at a place called Black Pine Camp. At least, that's what the wooden sign at the entrance said. The strange thing is, after everything happened, I couldn't find a single record that the camp had ever existed. Not online. Not on any map. Nothing. Sometimes I wonder if it was never meant to be found again. Or maybe only the people who survived remember it. I was 19 when I took the job. College wasn't cheap, and my roommate told me a summer camp in northern Montana needed counselors. The pay wasn't amazing, but it included food, a cabin, and 3 months away from the city. It sounded perfect. Fresh air. Fishing. Bonfires. Kids learning survival skills. Exactly what I needed after spending an entire year trapped in classrooms. The drive there took nearly 6 hours. The further north I went, the weaker my phone signal became. Eventually, it disappeared completely. The GPS froze on an empty stretch of highway before shutting itself off. I figured it wasn't unusual. We were deep in the mountains. After another 30 minutes, I reached a narrow dirt road with a faded wooden sign. Black Pine Camp. The paint had almost peeled away. The letters looked old enough to have been carved decades ago. Something about it bothered me immediately. Not because it looked abandoned. Because it looked forgotten. The trees around the entrance were impossibly tall. Their branches blocked most of the sunlight, making the road ahead darker than it should have been. I sat there for a moment with the engine running. For reasons I still can't explain. I almost turned around. I wish I had. The camp itself looked surprisingly normal. About 40 kids. 8 counselors. 3 log cabins. A dining hall. A small lake. An archery range. Everything you'd expect. The camp director introduced himself as Richard. Late 50s. Gray beard. Always smiling. But his smile never reached his eyes. "Welcome to Black Pine," he said. "You'll love it here." Then he paused. "As long as you follow the rules." Everyone laughed. I laughed too. Until he handed me a sheet of paper. It wasn't a schedule. It was a list. Just 6 rules. The first 4 were normal. Keep campers together. Lights out at 10. No swimming after sunset. Report injuries immediately. The last 2 were different. Rule 5. If you hear someone calling your name from the woods after dark, do not answer. Even if the voice belongs to someone you know. Especially then. I looked up. Richard was already staring at me. He wasn't smiling anymore. "People like to joke about that one," he said quietly. "They stopped joking after the first week." I forced a laugh. "Very funny. I'm not joking." Before I could ask anything else, he walked away. The counselors shared one large cabin. Most of them had worked there before. Only 2 of us were new. Me. And a girl named Hannah. She was 20. Funny. Outgoing. Always smiling. Within an hour we were already making plans to hike after the season ended. She noticed me reading the rules again. "They gave you the list too?" "Yeah." She laughed. "What do you think Rule 5 is about?" "No idea." "My guess?" She grinned. "Old mountain tradition." I nodded. "Probably." Neither of us believed it. Not yet. The first week went by without problems. The campers loved the lake. We played capture the flag. Built shelters. Roasted marshmallows. Everything felt completely normal. Almost. There were small things. Things that didn't make sense. Every morning, someone found muddy footprints around cabin 3. Bare feet. Too large to belong to any child. The strange part was, they always stopped at the wall. They never led away. Only toward it. Like whatever made them had disappeared. The maintenance staff blamed bears. Nobody believed them. Bears don't leave human footprints. One night I woke up around 2 in the morning. I wasn't sure why. Everything was silent. Too silent. Even the insects had stopped making noise. Then, I heard footsteps. Crunch. 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 Slow. Deliberate. Walking around the outside of our cabin. I checked the time. 2:17 a.m. The footsteps continued. Whoever it was, wasn't trying to hide. They circled the cabin once. Twice. 3 times. I looked toward the window. Nothing. Just darkness. Then, someone whispered my name. Very softly. Ethan. My heart nearly stopped. Only one person called me that way. My older sister. Except, she was nearly 2,000 miles away. The whisper came again. Ethan. I climbed out of bed. Half asleep. I reached for the doorknob. Before my hand touched it, another counselor grabbed my wrist. It was Marcus. He was already awake. His face looked pale. He didn't say a word. He simply shook his head. Slowly. Then he pointed toward the paper taped beside the door. Rule 5. Do not answer. Do not go outside. Especially if you recognize the voice. Neither of us moved. The whisper continued for almost 5 minutes. Then, it stopped. The silence that followed somehow felt even worse. The next morning, I asked Marcus about it. He refused to talk. I didn't hear anything. You grabbed my arm. I was asleep. You were awake. He stared at me for several seconds before quietly saying, if you want to finish the summer, pretend last night never happened. Then he walked away. That afternoon, one of the campers disappeared. His name was Noah. 8 years old. He wandered away during a nature hike. We realized he was missing after only 3 minutes. Every counselor started searching. Richard looked terrified. Not angry. Terrified. No shouting, he ordered. Use whistles only. That seemed strange. Normally you'd yell someone's name. Instead, everyone blew whistles. Sharp bursts echoing through the forest. After nearly 20 minutes, we found Noah. Standing perfectly still. About 200 yards into the woods. Facing a tree. He wasn't crying. He wasn't scared. He was smiling. I knelt beside him. Buddy, what are you doing? He pointed into the darkness between the trees. The lady said not to leave. I looked where he pointed. Nothing. Just empty forest. What lady? The one without eyes. Every hair on my arm stood up. There wasn't anyone here. He frowned. She was right there. He pointed again. Then, his expression changed. He suddenly looked confused. What happened? You don't remember? No. He looked around. Why is everyone here? None of us answered. We simply walked him back to camp. That evening, Richard canceled every outdoor activity after sunset. Nobody complained. After dinner, Hannah found me sitting alone by the dock. "You saw something today." It wasn't a question. I nodded. "So did you?" She looked across the lake. "My cabin window faces the forest. And every night," she whispered, "I see people standing between the trees." I laughed nervously. "Campers?" She slowly shook her head. "They're too tall." A cold breeze crossed the water. Neither of us spoke. Then, from somewhere deep in the woods, a whistle answered ours. One long, perfectly timed, human whistle. But no counselors were out there anymore. We both heard it. And for the first time since arriving at Black Pine, I realized something horrifying. Whatever lived in those woods was listening. And now, it knew exactly where we were. The whistle came again. Long, slow, perfectly controlled. It wasn't random. It was answering us. Hannah and I froze on the dock, listening as the sound drifted across the lake. It seemed impossible to tell where it came from. 1 second it echoed from the trees on the east side of the camp. The next, it sounded like it was behind us. Then it stopped. The forest fell silent again. Not the normal kind of silence. The kind that makes your ears strain because they know something should be there. Crickets. Owls. Wind. Anything. Instead, nothing. Not a single sound. Hannah stood first. "I'm going inside." She didn't wait for me. I watched her disappear toward the counselor's cabin before I looked back across the water. The lake was perfectly still. Except, there was a ripple. Just one. Near the middle. Like something had surfaced for a second, before sinking again. The next morning, Richard gathered every counselor in the dining hall before breakfast. He looked exhausted. His beard hadn't been shaved. Dark circles hung under his eyes. "I need everyone paying attention." Nobody spoke. "The campers stay together today. No exceptions." Marcus raised a hand. "What happened last night?" Richard ignored the question. "If you hear a whistle from the woods." He paused. "Do not answer it." Someone laughed nervously. Richard slammed his hand on the table. "I said don't answer it." The room went quiet. Then, just as suddenly as he'd lost his temper, he smiled again. The fake smile. The one that never reached his eyes. "Breakfast is ready." That afternoon, rain rolled over the mountains. Not a light summer shower. A wall of black clouds swallowed the sky. Thunder shook the cabins. The campers were excited. They crowded around the windows, cheering every flash of lightning. The counselors weren't cheering. Marcus stood by the door watching the forest. He looked scared. Actually scared. I walked over. "You've worked here before." He nodded. 3 summers. "So tell me what's going on." He stared into the rain for a long time. Finally, he spoke. "People disappear." I waited. "Every year." My stomach tightened. "What?" "They're always found." "Alive?" Marcus didn't answer. Instead, he looked at me. "When they come back, they aren't the same." Before I could ask another question, Richard called everyone outside to help move supplies before the storm got worse. Marcus walked away without saying another word. By sunset, the rain had stopped. The forest smelled fresh. The campers gathered around the main lodge for movie night. It was the first time all week the camp felt normal. Kids laughed. Counselors joked. Someone made popcorn. For almost 2 hours. Everything was fine. Then the power went out. The room went black. Children screamed. Emergency lights flickered on a second later. Richard stood immediately. Nobody leaves. One counselor checked the generator. Another checked the cabins. Everything seemed routine. Until one little girl quietly asked, "Who's outside?" Every adult turned toward the window. There, standing just beyond the light, was a person. Tall. Too tall. At least 7 feet. Perfectly still. Watching the lodge. The emergency lights flickered again. For a split second, the figure disappeared. When the light steadied, there were two. Neither moved. Neither blinked. Just watching. One of the younger counselors grabbed a flashlight and rushed outside. Richard shouted after him, "David! Don't!" Too late. The door slammed behind him. We watched through the window as his flashlight beam cut across the rain-soaked grass. The light landed on the first figure. Nothing. Empty space. He turned. The second figure was gone too. David looked confused. He swept the flashlight across the tree line. Nothing. Richard opened the door. "Come back." David started walking toward us. He had made it halfway, when he stopped. Completely still. Like someone had pressed pause. "David?" He didn't answer. Slowly, he turned his head toward the woods. Someone, or something, had whispered to him. We couldn't hear the words. Only the reaction. David smiled. Then he walked into the trees. Not running. Not struggling. Just calmly walking away. Richard and Marcus chased after him. The rest of us stayed with the campers. They searched until sunrise. They never found him. The camp closed the next morning. Parents were told there had been an emergency involving severe weather. No one questioned it. The buses arrived before noon. Within hours, the children were gone. Only the staff remained. Richard gathered us outside. "I need everyone packed within an hour." Hannah stepped forward. "What about David?" Richard looked away. "We're leaving." "Leaving him?" "We're leaving." Nobody argued. Not after the night we'd had. I loaded my car. The moment I turned the key, my phone came back to life. Dozens of missed messages. Voicemails. Texts. The strange part. Every one of them was 3 days old. I frowned. That couldn't be right. We'd only been at camp for 6 weeks. Or so I thought. I checked the calendar. My blood ran cold. It wasn't August anymore. It was September. Nearly a month had disappeared. I stared at the screen. No. That wasn't possible. I remembered every day. Every campfire. Every activity. Every meal. There was no missing month. But according to every message on my phone, I'd been unreachable for 28 days longer than I thought. I never saw any of the other counselors again. Hannah's phone number stopped working. Marcus vanished from social media. Richard didn't exist online. Neither did Black Pine Camp. I searched for months. Nothing. No business license. No website. No photographs. No employee records. Even the road where I turned off the highway was gone. It was as if the camp had been erased. 6 months later, I finally convinced myself I'd imagined most of it. Trauma can do strange things to memory. Maybe the stress, the isolation, the fear, had distorted everything. Then one evening, someone knocked on my apartment door. I looked through the peephole. No one. Just a small cardboard box. No return address. Inside was a whistle. Old. Wooden. The exact same kind we used at camp. There was also a folded photograph. The counselors standing in front of the dining hall. I recognized everyone. Marcus. Hannah. Richard. Me. But there was one problem. I didn't remember the man standing beside me. He had his arm around my shoulder. He was smiling. On the back of the photo, someone had written 5 words in faded black ink. You forgot him again. My hands started shaking. I looked back at the picture. The stranger's face looked strangely familiar. Like someone I'd known for years. Someone important. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't remember his name. Then, my phone rang. Unknown number. Against every instinct, I answered. For several seconds, there was only static. Then, a calm male voice whispered, "We're opening camp again this summer." Click. The line went dead. I threw the phone across the room. That night, I didn't sleep. Around 2:17 a.m., I heard slow footsteps outside my apartment window. Crunch. 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 My apartment was on the 4th floor. The footsteps stopped directly outside my bedroom. Then, someone whispered my name. Exactly the way my sister had that first night. I didn't look. I didn't answer. Because now, I finally understood Rule 5. Some voices aren't trying to get your attention. They're trying to find out whether you can still hear them. If you've ever been to summer camp, you know there's always one place you're told to avoid. Sometimes it's an old mine. Sometimes it's an abandoned cabin. Sometimes it's just a section of woods that counselors claim is unsafe. At Camp Raven Lake, it was cabin 14. No one was allowed within 100 yards of it. No exceptions. The strange thing was, it wasn't abandoned. Every morning, someone swept the porch. Fresh footprints appeared in the mud after every rainfall. At night, a lantern glowed inside. But according to every counselor, cabin 14 had been empty for over 20 years. I was 17 when my parents convinced me to spend 2 weeks at Camp Raven Lake. I hated the idea. No phone. No internet. No air conditioning. Just mosquitoes, hiking, and sharing a cabin with strangers. I wanted nothing to do with it. Looking back, I wish I'd stayed home. The camp sat beside a massive lake surrounded by pine forests. It was beautiful. Almost too beautiful. The kind of place where everything looked perfect during the day, but somehow wrong after sunset. Our counselor introduced himself as Ben. He looked friendly enough. Late 20s. Former Marine. Calm voice. The kind of guy who seemed impossible to scare. During orientation, he gave us the usual safety rules. Stay with your group. Don't swim alone. No fires outside designated pits. Then his expression changed. And one more thing. He pointed toward the northern side of the lake. If anyone asks you to visit cabin 14, he paused. Say no. Everyone laughed. One kid raised his hand. What if another counselor asks? Ben didn't smile. Especially if it's a counselor. The room fell silent. Naturally. That became the only thing anyone wanted to talk about. By dinner, everyone had a different theory. It burned down. It's haunted. A bear lives there. My cousin said somebody got murdered. Most of us assumed it was another camp legend. Every camp has one. We forgot about it. At least, we tried to. That night, I woke around 1 a.m. Someone was outside our cabin. At first I thought it was another camper sneaking around. Then I heard knocking. 3 slow knocks. Not on our door. On the window. Knock. 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 The bunk beside mine creaked. My cabin mate, Tyler, sat up. "You hear that?" Before I could answer, the knocking came again. Tyler reached for the flashlight beside his bed. He pointed it toward the window. Nothing. Just darkness. He frowned. Probably a branch. Then, a voice. Soft. Almost cheerful. "Tyler." It came from outside. Right beneath the window. Tyler froze. "Who's there?" Every counselor had told us not to leave our cabins after lights out. But nobody had said anything about talking. The voice answered. "It's Ben. Our counselor. I need your help." Tyler relaxed immediately. He climbed down from the bunk. I grabbed his arm. "Wait. It's Ben. Why would he be outside at 1 a.m? Tyler hesitated. The voice came again. "Hurry. I found something." It sounded exactly like Ben. Same tone. Same calm voice. Tyler started walking toward the door. Then, our cabin door burst open. The real Ben stood there holding a flashlight. He looked furious. "Everybody stay away from the windows." Tyler stopped instantly. Ben swung the flashlight toward the glass. There was nobody outside. The voice never spoke again. Ben closed every curtain before quietly saying, "If you hear someone using my voice again, pretend you didn't." The next morning, nobody mentioned what had happened. Not the counselors. Not the campers. Even Tyler acted like nothing unusual had occurred. I asked him about it during breakfast. "What?" "The voice." He stared at me. "What voice?" "You almost opened the door." He laughed. "I think you had a nightmare." I knew I hadn't. Because when I looked toward the window, I noticed 3 muddy handprints. On the outside. About 7 feet above the ground. Far too high for any person to reach. 2 days later, we finally saw Cabin 14. Our hiking trail passed the northern shore of the lake. Ben stopped everyone. "The trail ends here." One camper pointed farther ahead. "But there's another path." "There isn't." We all looked. The path was obvious. Wide enough for a truck. Leading straight toward an old cabin hidden between the trees. Ben's face lost all color. "Turn around." Nobody moved. Then, the cabin door opened. An elderly woman stepped onto the porch. She smiled and waved. "Hello." Several kids waved back. She looked completely normal. Gray hair. Blue sweater. Walking stick. Just somebody's grandmother. Ben didn't wave. Instead, he shouted. "Everyone back on the trail." The old woman kept smiling. Her lips moved. Even from that distance, I could hear her perfectly. "Come visit." Ben practically shoved us away. Nobody argued. As we hurried back toward camp, I looked over my shoulder. The woman was gone. The porch was empty. But the rocking chair beside the door was still moving, as if someone had just stood up. That night, Tyler whispered from the bunk below mine. "You awake?" "Yeah. I saw someone watching us during the hike." "The old woman?" "No." He sounded nervous. "There was a little boy standing behind the cabin." My heart skipped. "What little boy?" He kept waving. I sat up. There wasn't any kid there. Tyler didn't answer immediately. Finally he whispered. "He looked like me." Then, before I could respond, 3 slow knocks echoed through the cabin window. Knock. 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 And a familiar voice, sweet and patient, drifted through the darkness. "Tyler. We're waiting for you." The knocking came again. 3 slow taps. Knock. 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 Neither of us moved. Tyler stared at the window, his face drained of color. I could hear his breathing getting faster. Then the voice whispered again. "Tyler. You've been gone a long time." It sounded warm. Kind. Like someone welcoming a family member home. Ben's warning echoed in my head. "If you hear someone using my voice again, pretend you didn't." The voice wasn't using Ben's anymore. Now it sounded like an older woman. The same woman we'd seen outside cabin 14. Then, another voice joined her. A child's. "Please come outside. We've missed you." The cabin fell silent. Neither of us slept for the rest of the night. Breakfast the next morning was unusually quiet. Even the loudest campers barely spoke. Everyone looked tired. As if nobody had gotten any sleep. Ben walked in carrying a clipboard. His eyes stopped on Tyler. "You okay?" Tyler nodded. "I didn't sleep much." Ben looked relieved. "Good." Tyler frowned. "What do you mean, good?" Ben hesitated. Then quietly replied. "That means you stayed inside." Later that afternoon, heavy fog rolled across Raven Lake. Not the normal morning mist. This was thick enough to hide the shoreline. You couldn't see more than 20 feet ahead. The counselors immediately canceled all water activities. Campers were told to stay near the dining hall until the fog lifted. Around 3 o'clock, someone realized Emily was missing. She was only 10 years old. 1 minute she had been sitting with her friends. The next, she was gone. Ben grabbed a whistle and ordered every counselor into search teams. We spread through the camp, calling her name. After 15 minutes, we found her. Standing at the edge of the northern trail. The trail that led toward cabin 14. She wasn't crying. She wasn't scared. She was smiling. Ben knelt beside her. "Emily, what are you doing out here?" She pointed into the fog. "The nice lady wanted me to meet her grandson." Ben's face turned white. "What lady?" Emily looked confused. "The one who lives in the cabin. There isn't anyone living there." Emily slowly turned back toward the trees. "Then who was holding my hand?" Every counselor froze. There was no one beside her. Only the fog. Ben picked Emily up without another word and carried her back to camp. That evening, after the campers went to bed, I overheard Ben arguing with the camp director. They were standing outside the office. "I told you we should have closed this place years ago," Ben said. "We don't have a choice," the director replied. "We do." "No, we don't." Their voices dropped lower. I moved closer. The director sighed. "It only wants one." Ben looked horrified. "You're talking about children." "I'm talking about survival." I accidentally stepped on a branch. Crack. Both men turned toward me. The conversation ended immediately. At midnight, the camp's emergency siren blared. Every camper woke up. Counselors rushed everyone into the dining hall. No explanation. Just panic. Through the windows, I could see dozens of flashlights moving outside. People were searching the woods. Ben finally stood on a chair. Everyone stay inside. One camper asked the question everyone was thinking. What's happening? Ben took a deep breath. We lost someone. Who? He looked down at the floor. One of the counselors. Nobody spoke again. Around 2 in the morning, the lights went out. The emergency generator failed. The dining hall was almost completely dark. Children started crying. Then, 3 knocks echoed against the front door. Knock, knock. Knock. Everyone froze. A familiar voice came from outside. It was the missing counselor. Ben. Open the door. I hurt my leg. No one moved. The voice sounded exhausted. Painfully real. Please. One of the younger counselors reached for the handle. Ben grabbed him. No. But that's Jason. No. He's freezing. Ben's voice became firm. Jason knows the password. The counselor frowned. What password? Ben stared at the door. Then shouted. Tell me your first camp. Silence. 5 long seconds passed. Then the voice outside laughed. Not Jason's laugh. Not even human. It started soft. Then became deeper. Louder. Until the entire building seemed to vibrate. The children covered their ears. The knocking stopped. The laughter faded back into the woods. The next morning, the fog disappeared. Search teams found Jason. Less than half a mile from cabin 14. He was alive. Barely. He had no memory of leaving camp. No injuries. No broken bones. Just one sentence repeated over and over. They wanted me to stay. They said I already belonged there. He refused to speak again. The camp closed that afternoon. Parents arrived early to collect their children. Nobody was told the truth. The official explanation blamed dangerous weather conditions. Within hours, Raven Lake was empty. As my parents drove away, I looked back through the rear window. Cabin 14 was visible across the lake. For the first time, I noticed smoke rising from its chimney. Someone was home. Years passed. I tried to forget everything. College. Work. Marriage. Life moved on. Then one autumn afternoon, curiosity got the better of me. I searched for Camp Raven Lake online. Nothing. No website. No reviews. No old photos. It was as if the camp had never existed. The only result I found was a newspaper article from 1998. It described a fire that destroyed a lakeside summer camp. Every cabin burned to the ground, including Cabin 14. The article included one black and white photograph. I zoomed in. Standing beside the burned cabin was the elderly woman I'd seen waving at us. The caption beneath the picture read, Margaret Holloway, camp cook, died in the fire along with her grandson. I stared at the date. They had died more than 20 years before I attended camp. A week later, a package arrived at my house. No return address. Inside was a small wooden toy boat. The exact kind campers made during arts and crafts. My name was carved into the bottom. So was a message. Your cabin is ready. That night, I dreamed of Raven Lake. The fog. The trail. The old woman standing on the porch. She smiled exactly as I remembered. Then she stepped aside. The cabin door slowly opened. Inside, dozens of children stood silently. Every one of them smiling. At the very back was Tyler. He looked exactly 17 years old. He raised one hand and waved. Then he quietly said, "You should have visited when she invited you." I woke up gasping for air. My bedroom smelled faintly of lake water. At first, I thought it was part of the dream. Then I noticed something on my bedroom floor. A trail of wet footprints. They started beside my bed and led straight to my front door. The deadbolt was still locked. The chain was still in place. No windows were open. No one could have come inside. Yet the footprints continued across the porch, down the driveway, and disappeared into the darkness. I never returned to Raven Lake. I never tried to find Cabin 14 again. But every summer, on the first night of camp season, someone knocks on my front door. 3 slow knocks. Knock. 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 I never answer. Because some invitations are only meant to be accepted once. Every summer camp has rules. Don't swim after dark. Don't wander into the woods alone. Don't feed wild animals. At Iron Creek Summer Camp, there was only one rule that everyone remembered. Not because it sounded strange, but because nobody would explain it. Every night, exactly 10 minutes before lights out, the camp director walked to the center of camp, rang an old brass bell 3 times, and said the same sentence. "If the fire goes out, don't relight it." That was it. No explanation. No questions. Just those 8 words. The first night I heard them, I thought it was another camp tradition. By the 4th night, I realized everyone else was terrified of that bell. I was 18 when I became a junior counselor at Iron Creek. It sat deep inside the Appalachian Mountains, hours away from the nearest town. The place had been operating since the 1960s. Hundreds of kids came every summer. Parents loved it because there were no phones, no internet, and no distractions. Just hiking, canoeing, fishing, and campfires. When I arrived, the camp looked exactly like the brochure. Clean cabins. Crystal clear river. Towering pine trees. It felt peaceful. Too peaceful. The camp director, Mr. Ellis, welcomed the new staff with a quick orientation. Most of it was normal. Then he reached the final page. "There is one rule you will never ignore." He looked at each of us one by one. "If the campfire dies before sunrise, walk away." One counselor laughed. Mr. Ellis didn't. During my first week, everything felt ordinary. The campers were energetic. The days were busy. By the time evening arrived, everyone gathered around the massive campfire near the center of camp. Stories. Songs. Marshmallows. Exactly what you'd expect. One thing stood out, though. The fire was enormous. Far larger than necessary. Counselors constantly added fresh logs. Even after the campers went to bed. It never seemed to burn lower. Almost as if they were afraid to let it shrink. One evening I asked another counselor, Nate, about it. "Why do we waste so much wood?" He stopped smiling. "We're not wasting it." "Then why?" He looked toward the flames before answering. "The fire isn't for us." I laughed. "Then who's it for?" He never answered. Instead, he quietly tossed another log onto the flames. The first strange thing happened on my 6th night. I woke just after midnight. The cabin felt colder than usual. Not cool. Cold. Like someone had left the freezer open. I checked the small thermometer hanging beside the door. It read 39 degrees. In the middle of July. That made no sense. Then I noticed something else. The glow from the campfire was gone. My stomach tightened. The fire had never gone out before. Never. The entire cabin was dark. Outside, the forest was silent. I climbed out of bed and walked toward the window. Just before I pulled the curtain aside, someone whispered from the bunk behind me. "Don't." It was Nate. He was sitting upright, wide awake. His eyes never left the window. "Don't look outside." "Why?" "Because if it sees you looking, it knows you're awake." Every hair on my neck stood up. Then, something walked past the cabin. Slow footsteps. Crunch. 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 Not running. Not sneaking. Just walking. The sound circled the cabin once. Then twice. It stopped directly outside the front door. Neither of us breathed. A shadow slid beneath the crack under the door. Not feet. Not legs. Just darkness. As if someone standing outside had blocked every bit of moonlight. Then came a sound I'll never forget. 3 slow scratches. Across the wood. Like fingernails. Screech. 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 The cabin seemed to hold its breath. After nearly a minute, the scratching stopped. The footsteps continued toward the next cabin. Only then did Nate finally whisper. The fire died. Morning came. Everything looked normal again. Birds. Sunlight. Campers laughing. No signs of anything unusual. Except, every cabin door had 3 long scratch marks. Perfectly identical. I asked Mr. Ellis what had happened. He looked at the scratches for several seconds. Then quietly said, "It counted." "What?" He looked me straight in the eyes. "It always counts." Before I could ask what that meant, he walked away. That afternoon, a maintenance worker named Carl arrived with a truckload of firewood. He had worked there for over 20 years. As he unloaded the logs, one camper asked him, "Why is the fire so important?" Carl stopped working. His smile disappeared. "Because the dark likes empty places." Nobody laughed. Not even the adults. That night, counselors worked twice as hard to keep the flames alive. Huge logs. Dry wood. Fresh kindling. By midnight, the fire was roaring higher than ever. Mr. Ellis finally relaxed. "We're good tonight. At least." That's what he thought. Around 2 in the morning, a storm rolled over the mountains. Rain hammered the camp. Wind howled through the trees. Lightning struck somewhere nearby. Then, the impossible happened. The fire hissed loudly. And went completely black. Not dim. Not dying. Gone. As if something had swallowed every flame at once. The bell rang 3 times. Mr. Ellis shouted. Everyone inside. Counselors rushed the campers toward their cabins. As I turned toward the woods, I noticed something standing between the trees. It wasn't moving. It wasn't hiding. It was simply waiting. Then, another shape appeared beside it. Then another. Then another. By the time I reached my cabin, I realized they weren't trees. They were figures. Dozens of them. Standing perfectly still. Watching the camp, the storm swallowed every sound. Rain slammed against the cabin so hard it felt like someone was throwing rocks onto the roof. Lightning flashed. Again, lighting up the forest for only a heartbeat. The figures were still there. Dozens of them. Standing perfectly still between the trees. No faces. No movement. Just watching. Then the darkness moved. Not the people. The darkness itself. It flowed across the ground like black smoke, wrapping around the dying campfire until even the glowing embers disappeared. Mr. Ellis grabbed a burning log from the fire pit and shouted, "Inside! Now!" Every counselor rushed the campers into the nearest cabins. As I reached the porch, I looked back one last time. The figures were gone. Every single one. I felt a strange sense of relief. Until I heard footsteps. Coming from behind me. Slow. Heavy. Crunch. 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 I turned around. No one. Only the wet trail leading toward the woods. Then something hit the cabin wall. Once. Hard. The children screamed. Another impact shook the building. This time the windows rattled. Whatever was outside wasn't trying to get in. It was walking around us. Counting. One cabin. Then the next. Then ours. 3 slow scratches dragged across the front door. Screech. 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 Everyone inside held their breath. Even the youngest campers stayed completely silent. After what felt like forever, the footsteps continued into the darkness. No one slept that night. When sunrise finally arrived, the storm had vanished. The woods looked peaceful again. Almost normal. But the camp wasn't. Every cabin door had 3 fresh claw marks. The fire pit was cold. Not a single piece of wood remained. It was as if the fire had never existed. Mr. Ellis gathered everyone before breakfast. His face looked older than it had the day before. "The camp is closing," he said quietly. "No questions. Pack your things." Within 2 hours, parents began arriving. No explanations were given. The official story blamed severe storm damage. No one argued. Everyone just wanted to leave. As our bus pulled away, I looked through the back window. Mr. Ellis stood alone beside the empty fire pit. He wasn't waving goodbye. He was rebuilding the fire. Stacking log after log. Even though every camper had already gone. Years later, I learned Iron Creek Summer Camp had permanently closed that same summer. The land was sold. The cabins were demolished. Today, nothing remains except an empty clearing hidden deep in the mountains. But every July, local hikers report seeing a single campfire burning in the middle of that clearing. Always at midnight. Always surrounded by silent figures. Waiting for someone to let the fire go out.